My name is Rick, and I am 54 years old. For 30 years, I built our family auto repair business from the ground up, saving every dollar I could for retirement. I always believed my daughter Sarah would continue our family's good traditions. But one decision she made brought everything crashing down in a single night. The woman I raised to be strong and independent chose a dangerous criminal over her own family, and it cost us everything we had worked for. But what happened next, when my 15-year-old grandson found the courage to speak up, changed all of our lives forever. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. I promise this is a story that will make you think about trust and betrayal within families. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in a small town in southern Ohio, I learned the value of hard work from my father, who ran the same auto repair shop I eventually took over. Our shop sat on Main Street, with its red brick walls and the smell of motor oil that became as familiar as home cooking. The garage was my sanctuary, with tools arranged precisely on pegboards and workbenches that had seen 3 generations of our family's sweat and dedication. Sarah was everything a father could hope for. As a little girl, she would sit on an upturned milk crate in the corner of the garage, watching me work on engines, while asking endless questions about how things worked. She was brilliant in school, graduating valedictorian from our local high school before earning her accounting degree from Ohio State University. I was so proud when she walked across that stage, the first person in our family to graduate college. Her first marriage to David seemed promising at first. He was a decent man when he was sober, but alcohol became his master. For 7 years, Sarah tried to make it work, especially after Tommy was born. But watching David stumble through their front door at 2 in the morning became too much. Sarah filed for divorce when Tommy was 8, and she moved back to our town to start fresh. Tommy quickly became the light of my life. At 10 years old, he had his mother's sharp mind and a natural curiosity about how things worked. Every weekend, he would spend hours with me in the garage, learning to change oil, replace brake pads, and understand the heart of an engine. His small hands were surprisingly steady as he learned to use a wrench, and his questions showed a mechanical aptitude that reminded me of myself at that age. My wife Linda and I had saved $75,000 over 3 decades of careful budgeting. We lived modestly, drove used cars that I maintained myself, and rarely took vacations. Every dollar was set aside for our retirement and to help Tommy with college someday. Linda kept our savings in a joint account that both Sarah and I could access, something we set up years earlier when Sarah helped with our bookkeeping. Sarah found work as an accountant for Henderson Construction, a local company that built homes throughout the county. Her salary was steady, and she seemed content raising Tommy in the same town where she grew up. We had family dinners every Sunday, played board games on rainy evenings, and attended Tommy's baseball games together. Life felt secure and predictable. During those peaceful years, I taught Tommy everything I knew about cars. He learned to change oil at 12, could diagnose engine problems by listening to the sound by 13, and was helping me with brake jobs by 14. Our conversations in the garage ranged from carburetors to his dreams of becoming an engineer. Linda would bring us sandwiches and iced tea while we worked creating memories I thought would last forever. The town embraced our family. Customers trusted our work. Neighbors looked out for each other, and Tommy was making good grades while playing shortstop on his high school freshman team. Sarah seemed happy being a single mother, focusing on her career and raising her son. We had no idea that everything we built was about to crumble. Everything changed on a humid Friday night in June when Sarah decided to join her co-workers for drinks at Murphy's Tavern, a local bar known for live music and cold beer. She rarely went out, preferring to spend evenings helping Tommy with homework or reading in her favorite chair. But her friends convinced her to celebrate a successful project at work. That's where she met Jake Morrison. He was 35 years old, with dark hair, intense green eyes, and elaborate tattoos covering both arms. Jake rode a gleaming Harley-Davidson and dressed in expensive leather jackets that suggested money, though his source of income remained mysteriously vague. When people asked about his work, he would smile and mention something about being a consultant who helped people with investment opportunities. Sarah was immediately drawn to his confidence and charm. Jake had a way of making her feel special, bringing her flowers, taking her to expensive restaurants in nearby cities, and treating her like a queen. After 7 years of handling everything alone, the attention felt intoxicating. Within 2 weeks, Jake was spending most evenings at her house, and within a month, he had essentially moved in. The warning signs appeared immediately, but love made Sarah blind to them. Jake always paid for everything with cash, pulling thick rolls of bills from his pocket without explanation. His phone rang constantly with calls he would take outside, speaking in hushed tones about shipments, deadlines, and people with names like Spider and Crazy Eddie. When the phone rang, his entire demeanor would change from relaxed to tense, and he would disappear for hours without explanation. Tommy disliked Jake from their first meeting. Something about the man's eyes made the teenager uncomfortable. Jake would ruffle Tommy's hair and call him sport, but there was no warmth behind the gestures. When Tommy tried to share his concerns with his mother, Sarah would defend Jake, saying her son was just having trouble adjusting to having a man around the house again. Linda and I watched these changes with growing concern. Sarah began dressing differently, wearing tighter clothes and heavier makeup. She started coming home later from work, claiming she was grabbing dinner with Jake or attending events he had invited her to. Most troubling, she began neglecting Tommy, leaving him to fend for himself on school nights while she was out with her new boyfriend. During those early weeks, I tried to get to know Jake better. I invited him to help in the garage, thinking we might bond over working on cars. But Jake showed no interest in getting his hands dirty, preferring to smoke cigarettes outside while talking on his phone. When I asked direct questions about his work, he would deflect with vague answers about consulting and business opportunities that were too complicated to explain. One evening, while Jake was outside taking another mysterious phone call, Tommy confided in me. He told me about hearing strange conversations late at night about packages being delivered to the house when Sarah was at work, and about how Jake would become agitated whenever anyone asked too many questions. The boy's instincts were screaming that something was wrong, but Sarah refused to listen. I spent sleepless nights searching for information about Jake Morrison online, but found nothing substantial. No business website, no social media presence, no trace of legitimate employment. For a consultant who claimed to be successful, Jake Morrison seemed to exist in a digital vacuum that made me increasingly suspicious. As summer turned to fall, Jake's influence over Sarah deepened, and the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Sarah started asking for money, always with reasonable explanations that made it difficult to refuse. First, it was $500 for unexpected car repairs. Then $1,000 for medical bills that insurance didn't cover. Each request was accompanied by tears and promises that she would pay us back as soon as her next paycheck arrived. Meanwhile, Jake began appearing with expensive new possessions that didn't match his mysterious income. A gold Rolex watch appeared on his wrist, followed by diamond earrings for Sarah, and a leather jacket that cost more than most people made in a month. When we asked how he could afford such luxuries, Jake would laugh and talk about successful investments and business deals that were paying off. Tommy's anxiety grew as he witnessed increasingly strange behavior. He told me about phone calls Jake would take at midnight, pacing in the backyard, while speaking about shipments and warehouse meetings. The teenager began finding packages delivered to the house during school hours. Packages that Jake would quickly move to his motorcycle before Sarah returned from work. When Tommy asked about them, Jake would deflect with jokes about surprise gifts and business samples. The first major confrontation came when I checked our bank statements and discovered that Sarah had withdrawn $5,000 from our joint savings account. When I asked her about it, she became defensive and angry, claiming she had every right to access money that was technically hers too. She insisted the money was for emergencies and investments that Jake had recommended, but she couldn't provide specific details about where the money had gone. Jake's charm began wearing thin during family gatherings. He would arrive late, check his phone constantly, and make excuses to leave early. When Linda tried to engage him in conversation about his family or background, Jake would change the subject, or suddenly remember urgent business that required his immediate attention. His behavior made family dinners tense and uncomfortable. The packages became more frequent, and Tommy grew more worried. He described seeing Jake handle them carefully, as if they contained something fragile or dangerous. The teenager's protective instincts toward his mother were growing stronger, but Sarah dismissed his concerns as jealousy and adjustment problems. One particularly difficult evening, Tommy witnessed Jake become verbally aggressive with Sarah over money. The teenager was doing homework upstairs when he heard Jake demanding that Sarah ask her family for more cash, claiming that a big opportunity was about to slip away if they couldn't raise enough capital quickly. When Sarah hesitated, Jake's voice became threatening, and Tommy heard his mother crying softly. During this period, Linda's health began suffering from the stress. She developed insomnia and stomach problems, worried constantly about what was happening to our family. I found myself checking our bank accounts daily, watching our life savings slowly disappear as Sarah continued making unexplained withdrawals to fund Jake's mysterious ventures. Jake began pressuring Sarah about a major investment opportunity that required a substantial amount of money. He claimed to have connections with people who could guarantee huge returns on investments in legitimate businesses, but he needed cash quickly to secure their position. Sarah became obsessed with the idea of making enough money to secure Tommy's future and help her parents retire comfortably. The tension in our family reached a breaking point when Jake started making subtle threats about what might happen if people didn't mind their own business. During one Sunday dinner, when I pressed him for details about his work, Jake smiled coldly and mentioned that he had connections with people who knew how to handle problems that got out of hand. The threat was clear enough to make Linda gasp and Tommy out with fear. Everything exploded on a cold November morning when Tommy accidentally overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. Jake thought everyone was asleep, but Tommy had gotten up early to finish a science project. Hidden at the top of the stairs, the 15-year-old listened in horror as Jake discussed moving a shipment of product, coordinating with dealers, and avoiding police surveillance. The words drug trafficking became crystal clear as Jake detailed quantities, prices, and distribution methods. Terrified, but determined to protect his mother, Tommy came to me immediately after Jake left the house. With shaking hands, he repeated everything he had heard, providing details that made my blood run cold. That afternoon, I made the difficult decision to hire a private investigator using money from our dwindling savings to uncover the truth about Jake Morrison. The results arrived 3 days later and were more devastating than I had imagined. Jake Morrison had an extensive criminal record, including charges for drug trafficking, fraud, and assault. He was currently under investigation by the DEA as part of a major drug distribution network operating throughout the Midwest. The investigator provided police reports, mugshots, and evidence that Jake had been using multiple identities to evade law enforcement. Armed with this evidence, I confronted Sarah in our kitchen, while Tommy was at school. I spread the police reports across the table, showing her the mugshots and criminal history of the man she claimed to love. But instead of gratitude for uncovering the truth, Sarah became furious, accusing me of trying to ruin her happiness and insisting that Jake had changed, that his past didn't matter because he loved her. The confrontation escalated when I revealed that our bank records showed Sarah had transferred our entire remaining savings account, $70,000, into Jake's personal account the day before. She had used her access to our joint account to fund what she believed was a legitimate investment opportunity, but what was actually financing Jake's drug operation. When Jake returned that evening and realized I knew the truth, his facade of charm disappeared completely. He backed me against the wall in my own kitchen, his face inches from mine, and threatened that he had connections who could make problems disappear permanently. Jake mentioned specific details about our daily routines, Tommy's school schedule, and Linda's weekly grocery shopping trips, making it clear he had been watching our family carefully. Tommy witnessed this confrontation from the doorway, seeing Jake threaten his grandfather while his mother stood frozen in shock. The teenager realized that his family was in serious physical danger and that law enforcement needed to be contacted immediately. But he also understood that going to police would mean his mother could face criminal charges for unknowingly funding illegal activities. That night, after Jake stormed out promising there would be consequences for interfering with his business, Sarah finally broke down. She admitted she had ignored warning signs because she was desperate to feel loved and desired again. She confessed that Jake had been pressuring her for weeks to access our savings, claiming it was their only chance to secure a prosperous future together. The investigator's report revealed that Jake was not just a small-time dealer, but a key player in an operation that moved drugs worth millions of dollars throughout Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Federal agents had been building a case against the network for over a year, and Jake was one of their primary targets. Our family had unknowingly become involved in a federal investigation that could result in serious prison time for anyone found guilty of conspiracy. As I held my sobbing daughter and watched my grandson's face filled with fear and determination, I realized that our comfortable, predictable life was over. Jake Morrison had not just stolen our money, he had stolen our sense of safety and torn our family apart. But looking into Tommy's eyes, I saw a resolve that reminded me that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Tommy surprised everyone, including himself, with the courage he found in our family's darkest hour. The 15-year-old spent the next 2 days researching police procedures online during study hall, at school learning about witness protection evidence collection, and how civilians could safely cooperate with federal investigations. He was determined to save his mother from both Jake's influence and potential criminal charges. Using an old smartphone he found in our junk drawer, Tommy began secretly recording Jake's phone conversations. He would hide in closets behind doors and at the top of staircases whenever Jake was at the house gathering evidence of drug deals, money laundering, and threats against people who crossed the organization. The teenager showed remarkable patience and intelligence, never taking unnecessary risks while building a compelling case. 3 days after learning the truth about Jake, Tommy witnessed something that crystallized his determination to act. He saw Jake strike Sarah across the face during an argument about money, leaving a red mark on her cheek that she would later try to cover with makeup. The teenager realized his mother was not just financially vulnerable, but physically in danger from a man who was becoming increasingly desperate and violent. Tommy made the brave decision to contact Detective Harrison, whose name appeared on the DEA investigation files my private investigator had obtained. In a voice shaking with nervousness, The 15-year-old called the police station and asked to speak with someone investigating Jake Morrison. Detective Harrison was initially skeptical about receiving a call from a teenager, but became very interested when Tommy mentioned specific details about Jake's operation that only someone with inside access could know. The detective arranged to meet Tommy at school the following day, away from Jake's watchful eyes. Detective Harrison was a 20-year veteran with graying hair and kind eyes, who immediately recognized the teenager's courage and the value of his evidence. He explained the dangers of continuing to gather information, but praised Tommy for his bravery and his desire to protect his family. After reviewing Tommy's recordings, Detective Harrison asked the teenager to participate in a controlled operation. Tommy would wear a small recording device and try to get Jake to incriminate himself on tape, while federal agents positioned themselves nearby for safety. The plan was dangerous, but it offered the best chance of gathering enough evidence to arrest Jake and dismantle his entire organization. The sting operation took place on a Friday evening when Sarah was working late at her office. Tommy, wearing a wire hidden in his jacket, engaged Jake in conversation about his business activities, with remarkable composure for someone his age. The teenager asked questions that prompted Jake to brag about his connections, his income from drug sales, and his plans for expanding operations into neighboring states. Jake became suspicious when Tommy's questions became too specific and focused. The criminal's survival instincts kicked in, and he began searching the teenager for recording devices. When he discovered the wire taped to Tommy's chest, Jake's rage exploded into violence. He grabbed the 15-year-old by the throat and threatened to kill him for betraying the family. Federal agents burst through the front door just as Jake was reaching for a knife from the kitchen counter. Detective Harrison tackled Jake to the floor while other agents secured the house and arrested 2 associates who had been waiting outside in a van. The dramatic arrest was witnessed by neighbors who later described the scene as terrifying but necessary to protect our family. The subsequent investigation revealed that Jake's arrest was part of a coordinated federal operation that dismantled an entire drug network. Dozens of arrests were made simultaneously across multiple states, and agents seized millions of dollars in drugs, cash, and assets. Tommy's evidence and cooperation had provided the final pieces needed to bring down an organization that had been operating for several years. News media covered the story extensively, particularly focusing on the brave teenager who had risked his life to expose a dangerous criminal. Tommy was praised by law enforcement officials, school administrators, and community leaders for his courage and quick thinking. But the teenager remained focused on helping his mother recover from the trauma and betrayal she had experienced. The arrest marked the end of Jake's reign of terror over our family, but it was only the beginning of a long healing process that would test our bonds and challenge everything we thought we knew about forgiveness and redemption. The aftermath of Jake's arrest brought both relief and new challenges as our family struggled to piece together our shattered lives. Sarah's complete emotional breakdown lasted for days as she grappled with the reality of how thoroughly Jake had manipulated and deceived her. She had lost not just our life savings, but her sense of judgment and trust in her own decision-making abilities. Legal proceedings began immediately as federal prosecutors built their case against Jake and his criminal network. Our family was required to provide extensive testimony about our interactions with Jake, the money transfers, and the threats we had received. Sarah faced the terrifying possibility of criminal charges herself, though prosecutors ultimately determined she had been a victim rather than a willing participant in the conspiracy. The process of recovering our stolen money proved complicated and lengthy. Federal agents had seized many of Jake's assets, including expensive jewelry, motorcycles, and bank accounts. but most of the $70,000 had already been spent on drugs and criminal activities. We eventually recovered about $30,000 from seized assets, a fraction of what we had lost, but enough to provide some financial stability. Sarah enrolled in therapy to address the trauma and poor judgment that had led her into Jake's web of deception. Her therapist helped her understand how emotional manipulation works and why intelligent, capable people can still fall victim to sophisticated criminals. The sessions were painful but necessary as Sarah worked to rebuild her self-confidence and parenting skills. Family counseling became essential as we worked to restore trust and communication within our household. Tommy had been forced to grow up quickly, taking on adult responsibilities and making life-or-death decisions that no teenager should have to face. He struggled with nightmares about Jake's threats and worried constantly about his mother's emotional stability. Our small community rallied around our family in remarkable ways. Neighbors brought meals, offered financial assistance, and provided emotional support during the most difficult months of recovery. Local business owners hired Sarah for freelance accounting work when her reputation had been damaged by association with Jake's criminal activities. Tommy received recognition from the police department for his bravery, including a commendation from the state attorney general for his role in dismantling the drug network. However, the teenager was more interested in returning to normal teenage activities like baseball practice and hanging out with friends than in publicity or recognition for his heroic actions. The legal proceedings culminated with Jake receiving a 25-year federal prison sentence for his role in the drug trafficking organization. During his sentencing hearing, he showed no remorse for the damage he had caused to our family or the communities affected by his criminal activities. The judge specifically mentioned Tommy's courage in her remarks about why a harsh sentence was appropriate. Sarah's recovery was gradual, but steady. She found a new job with the accounting firm in the next town over, where her skills were valued and her past mistakes were unknown. She made a commitment to rebuilding her relationship with Tommy and earning back the trust she had damaged through her poor choices during the months with Jake. Family dinners slowly returned to their previous warmth and comfort. We instituted new traditions, including weekly game nights and monthly camping trips that helped us reconnect without the distractions and pressures of daily life. These activities helped Tommy process his experiences while giving Sarah opportunities to demonstrate her renewed commitment to being a responsible mother. The experience changed all of us in fundamental ways. Linda and I learned that protecting our family sometimes meant allowing them to make mistakes and face consequences, even when watching them struggle was painful. Sarah gained hard-won wisdom about recognizing manipulation and trusting her instincts when something felt wrong. Most importantly, Tommy emerged from the ordeal with a deep understanding of courage, integrity, and family loyalty that would serve him well throughout his life. His quick thinking and bravery had saved not just our financial security, but possibly our lives, and certainly our family unit. As I reflect on everything our family endured and overcame, the lessons learned feel both painful and precious. Tommy's extraordinary courage taught us that age and experience don't always determine who will step up when leadership is needed most. Sometimes, the clearest vision comes from the youngest eyes, uncluttered by adult compromises and rationalizations. The experience forced me to confront my own shortcomings as a father and grandfather. I had always believed that providing financial security and emotional support would be enough to protect my family from serious harm. Jake's manipulation of Sarah showed me that love and good intentions are not always sufficient shields against sophisticated predators who exploit human vulnerabilities. Sarah's transformation from victim to survivor became one of the most inspiring aspects of our family's recovery. She learned to forgive herself for the mistakes that had endangered all of us while taking full responsibility for rebuilding the trust she had damaged. Her journey back to being the strong, independent woman I had raised took years, but her determination never wavered. Tommy's character was forged in the fire of that terrible experience. He learned that doing the right thing often requires tremendous personal risk, and that protecting the people you love sometimes means making decisions they won't initially understand or appreciate. These lessons served him well as he finished high school with honors and earned a full scholarship to study engineering. Our family's bond, tested by betrayal and trauma, ultimately emerged stronger than before. We learned to communicate more honestly about our fears and concerns, rather than trying to protect each other from difficult truths. The experience taught us that real love requires courage, honesty, and sometimes painful conversations about uncomfortable realities. The financial losses, while significant, proved less important than we had initially thought. We adjusted our retirement plans, lived more frugally, and found satisfaction in simple pleasures that cost nothing but brought genuine happiness. Tommy's college fund was rebuilt through his scholarships and part-time work, proving that determination could overcome even major setbacks. Years later, Tommy would credit that difficult period with shaping his career choice in law enforcement. He became a federal agent himself, specializing in cases involving financial crimes and family protection. His first-hand experience with criminal manipulation and its devastating effects on families made him particularly effective at his job and passionate about protecting other families from similar predators. The garage where Tommy and I had spent so many peaceful hours working on cars became sacred space again. We returned to our weekend projects, but our conversations now included deeper topics about life responsibility and the courage required to stand up for what is right. Those talks prepared him for the challenges of adulthood in ways that no textbook ever could. Sarah eventually remarried, choosing a kind elementary school teacher named Michael, who understood her past and supported her growth. Their relationship was built on transparency, mutual respect, and shared values that provided the stability Sarah needed to fully heal from her traumatic experience with Jake. Looking back, I realized that Jake Morrison's entrance into our lives, while devastating at the time, ultimately revealed strengths and resilience we never knew we possessed. Tommy's courage saved our family in ways that went far beyond recovering stolen money or avoiding physical harm. He showed us what it means to love someone enough to risk everything for their protection. The story of our family's survival and recovery spread throughout our community and beyond, inspiring other families who had faced similar challenges. We received letters from people across the country who had dealt with financial fraud, domestic manipulation, and criminal infiltration of their families. Our experience provided hope that healing and justice were possible even after the most devastating betrayals. Today, when I watch Tommy working in the garage with his own children, teaching them the same lessons about integrity and craftsmanship that I taught him, I feel profound gratitude for the difficult journey that brought us to this place. Sometimes the greatest courage comes from the smallest voices, and sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected heroes. In our case, a 15-year-old boy saved not just money, but the soul of our entire family. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love, even when they couldn't see the danger they were in? Share your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the importance of family courage, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming life's greatest challenges. Share this video with someone who might need to hear about the power of standing up for what's right, even when it's scary. Thank you for listening to our family's story, and remember that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything. Until next time, trust your instincts, protect your loved ones, and never underestimate the power of doing what's right.